Welcome everybody to the May edition of the Salvation Army Homes podcast. My name is David. I'm a Tunbridge Wells resident of Salvation Army Homes. And today, as usual, I have Mary with me. Hi Mary.
Hi David. Hi there. Yeah, I'm Mary. I'm the Customer Insight Officer with Salvation Army Homes. Yeah, looking forward to another podcast with Sam. So she'll be coming along in a minute. Can't believe it's May already. It's May.
I know.
Anyway. Yes, so it's lovely to be here. Yeah, and I'll hand back over to you, David.
Lovely, thanks very much. Well, welcome Sam. Following on the success of the last podcast, we thought we'd have you back and give you another grilling, as it were.
Thank you, David. Thanks, Mary. It's good to be back and looking forward to it. And I particularly like May because it's my birthday month and I do like to stretch it out over the whole month as well.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Fantastic,
well, happy birthday for whenever it is, Sam.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. So, Sam, last time we talked about finance. This time we're going to just ask you, have a little chat about service charges, which is maybe perhaps a issue for some people because it tends to raise quite a lot of concerns. So, over to you. Tell us all about service charges.
Okay, so if you were to live in your own house, you would have bills to pay. So your gas, your electricity, water. You may have a cleaner or someone to come round and do your window cleaning for you. Because we have a lot of accommodation that is shared, so that might be individual flats within a big block, or it could be in our supported accommodation, shared rooms that share facilities such as bathrooms and kitchens. What we do is we pay for those services on behalf of our tenants, our residents, and then we ask them to pay it back so that it's fair and we can make sure that the buildings are getting the services that they need. So when I pay my gas and electricity bill, I have a gas meter that's just for my house, but we don't always have that on our properties. So in the shared properties, we would have maybe 1 meter for a flat for 3 people. So what we do is we pay it on the behalf of those 3 people, for example, and then we ask them to pay a third of that cost back to us. So it's essentially covering costs that are split across the whole building or a shared unit and making sure that we pay it and then we can split that back out and ask people to pay us back for it rather than having to have that arrangement between the residents.
That's fantastic. So one of the questions that I often get from other residents is how do Salvation Army Homes manage it? Because when they get their rent statement through on it says you're paying for these services and there's a 15% surcharge on top for administration. So how does Salvation Army Homes actually come to that amount?
So that's an industry standard actually. 15% is the maximum that an organisation could charge, and that's within the guidance for registered housing providers. And you have to think about the admin that Salvation Army Homes incur because of that. As I said, we're actually paying the bills. So we've got somebody coming in, opening the post, looking at the council tax bills and the electricity bills. We've got finance processing those invoices. We've then got directors approving the payment for those invoices. We've got our procurement team that are working on the bulk contracts for those contracts if we were thinking about gas and electricity. So there's a lot of people in corporate services that are working on arranging and paying for those services so that people living in the homes have got the things that they need. And so that's covering our costs really, because it does form part of people's jobs in corporate services.
Wonderful. I thought that might be the case, but you put it so eloquently. Thank you very much. Another question that I get from people as well is they say to me, hang on a minute, have you seen this service charge? We're paying for this, but we're not getting it. What's going on?
Yeah, and we really do want people to tell us when that's the case. Obviously, we arrange contracts corporately. And so, for example, we'll arrange the groundsman to come once a week or once a month to look at the communal gardens and things like that. As much as we can, we have contract meetings with them, but we need people on the ground to tell us that that's not happening so that we can hold contractors to account. And we do set out from the beginning a service specification that says they will be there X amount of times a year or X amount of times in the summer. And if they're not doing that, we need to know about it so that we can hold them to account. We can make sure that they are going out. And if they refuse to do it, or they're not doing it well enough, that we can get a contractor that provides the services that we expect for our properties.
Lovely. So if, let's just say, a number of residents or a resident at a particular scheme has concerns, then how should they contact about this concern? Should they go through their neighbourhood manager, or perhaps they could pass it on to the scheme contact who can contact somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously the first port of call would be an assistant neighbourhood manager, because that's probably the person that you're speaking to the most. Equally, if there are concerns, call up the customer contact centre and let them know, and that will get passed on to the relevant people. We do have staff out and about, so basically anybody who's an advocate for Salvation Army Homes, they are aware of it, they'll feed it back to the right people, because it is important that people get the services that they're paying for.
One of the other questions that I get from people as well is they say, well, we've got these particular contractors, whatever they are, and I think the one that seems to raise most ire is gardening services. And they're saying, well, why can't we hire somebody locally who can actually do the job better than perhaps a national conglomerate?
I suppose the way to think about that is value for money. I think the general perception is that if you use somebody locally, then you would be able to get a cheaper service. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be a best value for money service. So if you were to employ a local contractor, for example, you might not get a service when they were on annual leave, or if they were off sick for a period of time, something like that. Whereas when you procure kind of a national contract in geographical areas, you should be able to get economies of scale. But what you also should be able to get is a consistency of service. And centrally, there's only then one contract to manage. And if, in the example that you just used, if people are not turning up, we can hold them to account at a much higher level than if we're dealing with it on a scheme by scheme basis. So there is obviously, a perception that it would be a cheaper service and maybe a better service. But in terms of management of that contract, if they're not performing, it's much easier if we procure on a larger scale. And so we're dealing with a contract manager that's dealing with a bigger area. And, if they're not performing, it's a much bigger threat for them to lose a big geographical area than perhaps one scheme. So it does kind of carry some weight by procuring on a larger scale.
That's great. Talking about procurement, there have been thoughts in the past about residents having an input into which contractors will be given a contract. So is there any progress on that?
Yeah, we definitely want to get residents involved in, everything that we do, and procurement's no exception to that. When things are on a local level, it's obviously easier to do that, but we do want feedback into the process. We're going out to procurement for some of our maintenance contractors later this year, and that would be a big process, and we certainly would want to get residents involved in that. I'm not quite sure what that looks like yet, but it is, it's in our ethos and our values to put residents at the heart of what we do, and to let them have their say. And, that's what the regulator wants as well. So, yeah, that will definitely be happening.
That's fantastic. Maybe perhaps something on the website at some point saying if you want to get involved in this, then
yeah, definitely. Once we kind of have a firmer idea of what the procurement exercise is going to look like, we can work out where the best place for resident involvement to be. But yeah, once we've mapped that out, we can certainly put something on the website, and obviously we encourage as many people as possible to be involved.
Well, that's lovely. Mary, do you have any questions of Sam?
Yeah, I do actually. It's kind of back on a service charge question. I wondered, Sam, I believe that there are service charges that would be paid for within housing benefit, and there are other service charges that would need to be paid for from other income, other benefits from our residents who are on benefits. We've got a fair proportion of people who would be claiming housing benefit. Is that right, that housing benefit will pay some of the service charges, but others will need to be paid from their own other benefits income?
That's right, Mary, yeah. To use a very broad rule, if the charges relate to a communal area, then they are housing benefit eligible. So if you think about the cost of utilities for the communal areas, or window cleaning for the whole building, or the gardening, as we just talked about, those would all be covered by kind of the communal costs, because there'd be areas that were shared by everybody, and therefore housing benefit would pay those. Where people have to pay something towards their service charges out of their own money or out of their other benefits, that's when it relates specifically to their room. So, for example, they may pay a proportion of the gas and electricity because it relates to their room, or if we, in a supported scheme, for example, if we serve food, because that's a personal thing, people would pay for their food in a catered supported housing facility. So roughly the split is around what's communal and is shared by everybody, and what specifically relates to the home of the individual.
Great, that's great, thank you. That's a nice kind of simple explanation, because I know it gets a bit confusing, because obviously the two things are called service charges, so I think it can get a bit confusing for people. So thanks, Sam, that's great. Yeah, no other questions, thank you.
Well, I don't think I've got any more questions, but I'll pass it back to you, Sam. Is there anything burning in your mind that you think our listener would like to know about?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd just like to explain a little bit about our service charges and the way that we set them, because there are variations, and people might have lived in accommodation from a different landlord that was done slightly differently. But at Salvation Army Homes, we have fixed service charges. So we'll set them, and the letters went out, which is why we spoke last time. And the new charges start from the 1st of April. And what we do is base those charges on the previous year's spend and then any kind of known events. So utilities is a good example. Everybody will have seen in the news a couple of years ago about the big hikes because of various world events causing supply issues. And so there was a big hike in utility bills for most people in the country. And because we knew that those hikes were coming and that we would incur additional costs, we were able to set the service charges at a higher rate to cover that. Now, we didn't manage to capture all of it, and so Salvation Army Homes ended up spending more than we recovered on income. But because we do fixed service charges, that's our loss. We didn't calculate it right, so Salvation Army Homes bear the cost of that. And in some circumstances where we've estimated that it might be too much, that again, the idea is to get it exactly right. We might get some things slightly over, some things slightly under, but we fix the charges at what they are. We don't come back like you might do in a leaseholder arrangement and say, we thought we were going to spend X amount last year. We've done the accounts and actually it's 10% more. So can you give us more money? If we don't calculate it right, we bear the cost of that. So obviously getting it right and budgeting and the service charge letters that go out is really important to us, because we don't want to charge people too much. Equally, we don't want to make a huge loss either. So it's different. Some organisations do variable charges where they will take their spend at the end of the year and reconcile that with what they've charged people and either ask for more money or give a little bit back. But we do fix service charges, which is absolutely fine, and the way that we choose to do it. As I mentioned before, when we know that costs are going to go up like the utilities, we try and predict that in advance and make sure that we cover our costs. But equally, when we know that they're going to go down, as they did recently with the new utility cap and the reduction in the cost price of utilities, we do put them down as well. So quite a number of our residents saw a large reduction in their utility costs on their service charge statement this year. So it's not all one-way traffic. It's not always going up. If we know that the wholesale cost of utilities are coming down, then we'll put the costs down as well. So, as I said, we do try and accurately predict what the total cost of the service charges is going to be, going up and going down.
That's lovely. Thanks very much for that. That's absolutely wonderful. You're quite right. I just received my rent statement letter recently, which was brilliant. Thank you very much. On it, you will notice that there is an explanation about the way the service charges are shown. I do urge people to read it, because I was caught out once by the standard accounting practice of having a minus in front of the sign, which actually threw me a little bit. But it is explained, and if you've got any problems with anything to do with your rent statement, then please contact the customer service centre and they'll explain it all to you as well. So for me, that's the end of the podcast. Mary, have you got any more?
Not really. I just need you to tell me what the minus means. Is it good? Are you in credit?
You are actually in credit. As I say,
Marvellous.
it's explained on the letter, but
Right.
yeah.
I was just worried there for a minute. But no, that's it.
Perhaps Sam might explain one day about standard accounting. Perhaps. Not today.
I don't want to bore people and send them to sleep.
Yeah, standard accounting. We'll have that around Christmas time, shall we?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, when we're really bored. Yeah, but never mind. Okay, well that's the end of the podcast today. So I'd just like to say thank you to Sam for eloquently putting everything down about service charges. And thank you to you, Mary, for your input there. Brilliant. Well, all I'm going to say is, well, it's goodbye from me.
Yeah, it's been great. And it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me for the second time. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely pleasure. Bye.